What's up, everyone? Alex here, and welcome to my little corner of the internet. We are going back to the topic of labels, and I wanted to talk about why there are so many similar labels that exist in the overall queer community. Obviously, within the specific trans community, because I don't really specialize in like orientation terms or concepts. It's not something I try to like really get into, but for gender labels, there's a lot of very similar gender labels that it's kind of hard to keep track of what the differences are. A lot of them sound very similar. A lot of them have very similar definitions, but usually there's a distinction between the differences between the labels. Sometimes it's because people coined like two different terms around the same time, and then they ended up very similar to one another. And some people just have label preferences, even if they're almost identical in definition. Maybe someone prefers one over the other. One big one that I talked about in a previous video was non-binary versus abinary. And the simplest way to explain it is that non-binary is not fully male or female. Any gender that is not fully male or not fully female. So non-binary can include terms like demi-boy or demi-girl that are related to the binary. It can include being genderless, being neutroid, being gender fluid, gender flux. So just anything that is not fully related to the gender binary. Abinary is completely removed from the gender binary, and it has another term, aphorian. So that would be not at all related to being male or female. So neutrality can be counted as an abinary identity. Demi-boy and demi-girl would not be considered because they have a connection to the gender binary in that they are partly boy, partly girl. So abinarity is entirely removed from the gender binary. Some people consider themselves to be non-binary, but not abinary. Some people are abinary and they don't consider that non-binary, but it is under the non-binary umbrella. Agender, gender null, and gender void. A lot of terms that generally talk about agenderlessness. Agender being a lack of gender identity, more like just not applicable. There's nothing there. Nothing apply, like no gender term really applies to that person. Gender null is more so an emptiness, a nullification of gender. So whereas gender null might be represented by an empty glass, for agender people, there is no glass. Gender void is an empty space, like a void, where gender feels like it should be. So it's more of a, there should be something here, but there's nothing here. It's empty. Whereas agender doesn't recognize that there even should be anything there. They are not, like that idea is not applicable to them. My favorite, polygender versus multigender. There is quite a lot of conflating between these two terms. Polygender is typically used to refer to being more than one gender, and a lot of the time it is a non-specific way to say I have more than one gender. So polygender can be any number of genders in part or in whole. So, you know, 2 partial genders, 3 partial genders, multiple genders. Things like pangender, omnigender would fall under the polygender label. Multigender is a little bit more specific. It refers to anything that polygender is underneath multigender in a lot of ways, where multigender is the larger, like, you know, being demigender, being gender fluid, gender flux, an implication of multiple genders, or gender expressions, or just a difference in genderedness over time. Because a lot of people say they're demigender, but they don't really see that as multiple genders. Multiple distinct singular genders, it just means that you're part one gender, without specifying another part. So multigender is the larger umbrella. Polygender is underneath that. Multigender could be any number of things, whereas polygender doesn't usually refer to being demigender. It doesn't usually refer to being gender fluid or gender flux. It usually refers to entire distinct genders. Some people also might just prefer one over the other. Someone might say that they're multigender without specifying any kind of label. Some people might say polygender and use that in the same exact way. It really just depends on what the preference is, but multigender, you can remember, is the larger term, the larger umbrella term. Quigender and castgender. Quigender refers to kind of an umbrella of experiences of either not knowing what your gender is, feeling that you have kind of a hazy feeling of gender, or that you feel gender doesn't really apply to you. It's a number of different things, and castgender can fall under that. Castgender is just another word for gender apathetic, and quigender includes gender apathy. So 2 different words for very similar experiences, but quigender is an umbrella term for a number of just you don't know. You're not sure like what your gender might be. You're not sure if gender even applies to you as a concept. We have Omnigender versus pangender. Just by its root words, they sound absolutely identical. Pangender is every single gender, being every single gender within your own culture. So anything at all. You are every gender that you possibly have access to. Omnigender is kind of the same thing, but it often refers to an almost uncountable number of genders, or almost all genders, or you're every gender and there is a distinction between them. Pangender doesn't normally have a distinction between genders. It's just the overall statement of I have every gender. Omnigender is like, I have every gender and here's what they are, and I feel these at different times. I feel this right now, and I'm going to feel this like later. I don't know why you would predict what gender you would feel in the future, but maybe some people can. Maybe they got it on a shelf and they're saving it for when they have to go out to like a party or something, and they just pop open a bottle of that gender and there you go. But Omnigender typically specifies genders, or it implies that it's not every gender, but it's almost every gender, to the point where you can't really count them. That's where you get terms like bigender, trigender, quadgender, and at a certain point it's like, well, this is just omnigender. I can't count them. So pangender is the overall like every gender, and then omnigender, it's parallel to that. I wouldn't really say that omnigender can fall under pangender, but maybe it does. I've always seen them as 2 different terms that are related to one another and very similar, but I never pictured pangender being like the umbrella term for omnigender, but it can be. Depends on how you conceptualize these genders in your head. Androgen versus androgynous. A lot of people are familiar with androgyny. A lot of people have heard the term androgynous. It's usually a presentation or expression that combines masculine and feminine qualities. A lot of the time, it's kind of an indistinguishable gender, but not all the time. Sometimes you can lean more one way than the other. Sometimes there's a perfect blend, and being androgynous could mean you cannot distinguish a gender. There is no like looking kind of feminine, looking kind of masculine. It is a blend that makes it hard to distinguish either of them. But for some people, it's just a blend of masculine and feminine together. And sometimes you can see that distinction in the way that they present or express themselves. Androgen is the combination of male and female. It is a multi-gender identity. It also exists in between male and female. It depends on how the person wants to use that label, but it is not masculine and feminine. It is male and female. So these are distinct genders rather than gender qualities. I talked about gender qualities versus genders. Gender qualities being masculine, feminine, neutral. Genders being male, female, neutral, things like that. So androgen is the combination of male and female. Androgynous is the combination of masculine and feminine. Aporagender and maverick. Aporagender refers to anything that is not male, not female, existing not anywhere in between those, but is also not genderless. So it's a genderedness that is abinary. Maverick is a genderedness that is abinary, but it does not include neutral. It does not include masculine or feminine. It is farther outside of the gender binary than aporagender is. So it is not neutral, and neither of them are genderless, and neither of them are in any way related to male or female. So understandably, you might mix the two up, but aporagender is kind of the larger term. It kind of encompasses more identities because it encompasses neutrality, and maverick is an Aporagender. Aporin is the gender quality related to being Aporagender. So they're kind of related in that way. They have the same gender quality. Maverick is distinguished by its gender autonomy, by its way of self-identifying and being entirely outside of any kind of gender construct, just not being genderless. So agender would not be considered an aporagender, and it would not be considered maverick because there's a genderedness to the two of these terms. So aporagender, not male or female, there is a genderedness, and a lot of neutral genders can be aporagender. Maverick, outside of male, female, masculine, feminine, and anything in between those, and not neutral and not genderless. There are a lot of terms out there that are incredibly similar to one another, or they seem almost identical in their definitions. There's always specific distinctions to tell them apart, but there's a lot of words for things. There's a lot of words for genders. A lot of labels out there. If you can think of any that I did not mention, let me know. I just kind of came up with what I thought were some really good main kind of commonly known genders in the queer community that I wanted to talk about. Yeah, anyway, I hope everyone's doing well. I am going to spend the rest of my day cleaning because I've done all of the videos I need to record, which is excellent. I am on task this month. Hopefully I can stay on task with other stuff I have to get done. And other than that, I am signing off for now. See you later.